Hello, so it's 7:37 p.m. Pacific time. Just got done watching the PlayStation 5 game reveal show and just blown away with what was shown it. So I know I'm a little late to this, but yeah, I can't just amazing. I hate Sony right now. They can just take all my money. They can take it. They can take it. They can take my money. But yeah, just but really just unbelievable show. I have a lot of different just kind of general thoughts having just watched the show. I'm gonna after I record this video try to watch some other people's actually reactions. Maybe watch like Easy Allies reactions. I've always kind of liked them back to the days when some of those people worked um, for Game Trailers TV, and just try to find some kind of general more info because there's also some questions I have for some of the games, and a lot of games didn't necessarily get like a release date or window or whatever. So there's a lot of games that were announced that might be a 2021 game, might even be a 2022 game, and just hard to say. But yeah, just an amazing conference overall. I'd say my only real disappointment, well, a couple, is not seeing the new Batman Arkham game if it's even being made. But there's been, and the reason I say that if it's even being made, is there's been so many rumors and supposed leaks over a while now, a couple of years really, and nothing's came out of it. And with the way Warner Brothers kind of hyped things, it looked like we were going to get an announcement any time back in like November or something. Like we may get the announcement during the video game awards, and that didn't happen. There's been several other times where you would think, okay, this is a good time. It makes sense for them to release the Batman or whatever they're gonna call it. If, like I said, if it's actually being made, then and have it including today. And I've kind of just given up on that though. So that's why I say that one's a disappointment, but at the same time, kind of given up on that. And then the other one I would say is Horizon Zero Dawn looks amazing, but I was expecting it to be a launch game actually, or even get like a launch window on it, and it had no sort of date, which makes me think that with the way other games were and stuff, that won't be out till at least like middle of next year, maybe even 2022. And like I said, I was actually expecting that to be either a launch game or a very early 2021 game. However, with all that was shown, I can kind of look past the fact that Horizon didn't officially get a official release date, especially because, like I said, just so much just goodness shown throughout the presentation. Very hyped for PlayStation 5. I tend to be someone who I have a hard time not getting consoles on day one, just given into the hype overall of just new technology and the possibilities. But at the same time, a lot of times when you look at systems, the first year, 18 months or so, year and a half, there's not a lot of games for new consoles a lot of times, or especially exclusives at least. It's usually kind of a quiet time, and with what Sony showed today and whatnot, I think we're going to have a better launch lineup than you typically see for new systems. So that's exciting that I feel like we're going to have a better start and not have kind of that slow turn from one generation to the next where you're not getting a lot of new interesting things. But basically, I just wanted to kind of go over kind of some thoughts about different games that are shown. I tried to kind of make a little bit of a note to myself on different things that were shown because there was just so much shown. And but yeah, basically the beginning, just within a couple minutes, Sony had me because two of the first I think three things that were shown basically were a Spider-Man Miles Morales game and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. And I'm a big Insomniac fan. Those are both Insomniac games, and I love Spider-Man. And so that both of those have me really hyped, and big surprise in a lot of ways with Insomniac. And it brings up some questions, which is also interesting when it comes to Insomniac and release day of things, which is, the Miles Morales game from what was shown looks like it might be kind of like some sort of smaller game spin-off, if you will, kind of like when Uncharted 4, after that they had Uncharted The Lost Legacy. So it looks kind of like that. The big difference between those with Naughty Dog when they did Uncharted and now with Insomniac here in Spider-Man is that the Uncharted Lost Legacy came after Uncharted 4, and there was never, well, maybe not never, but there wasn't so much speculation about, oh yeah, they're going to do an Uncharted 5 type of thing. Where here, on the other hand, you have Insomniac perhaps doing a spin-off game before what's supposed to be the first sequel that they're going to do in Spider-Man 2, because it's not been officially announced, but there's been a lot of speculation. It's pretty, and it's one of those, not officially announced, but pretty much guarantees that they will make an, second Spider-Man game full sequel. And so it's interesting that they're, doing this before you get the first sequel rather than maybe having some sort of spin-off and then the sequel. But at the same time, I understand because with Miles Morales, this is kind of a setup perhaps for the second game because of the fact that in the first game, Miles Morales got his powers. So it's interesting. And what's interesting about getting this spinoff and how it was a surprise too is just the release date on things. And the reason I say that is that before this was shown, a lot of people kind of had Ratchet and Clank being the next Insomniac game as like a launch game, and then Spider-Man later, maybe in 2021 or something. But it turns out that the Spider-Man Miles Morales game is actually a launch game, holiday 2020. So yeah, it's interesting that that's actually first and that they had that quick of a turnaround. Even though, like I said, this might be a smaller spin-off type game. I want to see if I can kind of find more info on that. And the trailer looked good, but at the same time, they didn't really show a ton. But obviously, a lot of the games that they showed didn't necessarily show 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes or whatever of gameplay. There was a few that showed a decent amount of gameplay. Ratchet and Clank was one, but yeah, it's just interesting because with Insomniac coming out with the Spider-Man game and first, and it also being a spin-off, it kind of makes you wonder, well, what will the release dates and stuff look like for the Ratchet and Clank game now, and for a potentially actual full-on Spider-Man 2 game. Like, what I'm thinking kind of right now, and it'd be interesting to see what other people think, is I'm thinking we might have the Spider-Man spin-off as a 2020 game, holiday 2020, like I said, and then I'm thinking that we might have the Ratchet and Clank game instead of a launch game, like people thought it would be. I'm thinking we're actually going to have Ratchet and Clank be a 2021 game, and that Spider-Man might end up being a 2022 game, the Spider-Man 2 game, that is. So it's just kind of interesting. We could, if that happens, you're talking about 3 straight years with an Insomniac game to start the generation, which, I mean, is fine by me. Insomniac, such a good developer, so quick, too, in what they're able to do. And so that's interesting and exciting. And it's interesting, too, because I thought with Ratchet and Clank that they would kind of say something about how long it's been in development, because there's been so many rumors about Ratchet and Clank being in development for a while. There was rumors at one point by someone that had a lot of credibility that it was going to be a PS4 game, got switched over to PS5. But because of those rumors, plus the fact that it's been a while since the last Ratchet and Clank and just kind of the time of everything, there's a good chance that this Ratchet and Clank has by far the most development time of any Ratchet and Clank, which is really exciting when you think about new console, new capabilities with that console, and the fact that they may have worked on this game a lot longer than the other Ratchet and Clanks, because the other Ratchet and Clanks had some pretty fast development cycles. So yeah, with Spider-Man, I see it, like I said, it'll be 2020, like we saw. Ratchet and Clank, I'm thinking will be a 2021, and I think Spider-Man 2 will be a 2022 game. That's kind of my thoughts now on those 3 games. 2 of which we saw, the other one not confirmed, but I think it's pretty likely, obviously, that we're going to get Spider-Man 2 down the line after this kind of Spider-Man spinoff. So it'll just be kind of interesting to see how much gameplay does this Spider-Man game have, the length of it. Will it be a full $60 game, or will it be kind of a shorter and a game shorter and a game that charge less for, kind of like how when Insomniac did games like Ratchet and Clank into the Nexus. I think that was instead of like a $60 game, like a $40 game, since it was shorter. So it'll be interesting to see if it's something like that. But yeah, playing as Miles Morales, opportunity for that. I think it's pretty cool because he was, really cool. I like the way they developed him in the first game, him and Peter's relationship in that first game. It'll just be interesting to see how that continues now. here in this kind of spin-off game. And like I said, get more details about it, which I'm going to try to do after this video. And Ratchet and Clank just looks amazing. I think this is where the SSD comes in on the PlayStation 5. The fact that, you saw throughout both the trailer and then the little bit of gameplay that they showed, you see Ratchet and Clank, it looks like he's basically teleporting through dimensions and through different locations. And the fact that you can that there's times perhaps where you can do that with a weapon, it looked kind of like, as well as just maybe story parts where you're doing it in a cutscene or whatever. But just the idea that you can basically jump from different planets or different realities in a very smooth second, that just blew my mind. That just looks unbelievably amazing and incredible, and like something that's going to kind of revolutionize the Ratchet and Clank franchise. Because as much as I do love the Ratchet and Clank franchise, after Crack in Time, which was actually the first one I played, the franchise did stall a little bit in that you had kind of some smaller Ratchet and Clanks, as well as some that maybe weren't great, like All For One, and then even the Spider-Man on PS4 I loved, but at the same time it was reimagined, excuse me, and so it was kind of like a similar to the first one because of that. And that's the other thing about this game is, like I said, the teleporting type thing just looks amazing, as well as the fact that this I heard is a complete brand new game, and I think it actually takes place in the future timeline, basically, where you had Ratchet and Clank Crack in Time and Tools of Destruction and like into Nexus and stuff. And so the fact, and I believe that's what I heard, or at least I know they said it is a completely new one and not another reimagine. And so that excites me a lot too. The fact that it's completely new, because that just will make it even more fresh compared to the 2016 one. Even though, like I said, I did like a lot. So just amazing stuff by Insomniac to start this generation. But yeah, moving on from Spider-Man, Ratchet and Clank and whatnot, Project Anthem I thought looked interesting with just the way it looked with I believe it was kind of like a cartoon character who had like a staff and was doing stuff, and it looked like you got dragons and stuff, and the music just sounded really good. That was one of the things that kind of stood out on that particular trailer, and what looks, like I said, like a new IP of some sort. I don't think it got a release date, but that's one of those games that I'm very interested in seeing more going forward. I just thought it looked very kind of different and like the sound of it, and just be interesting to see more like how the combat works and such. Then you had House or something, I don't know how you pronounce it. The ones that did like Rogo's Son, and that's the game I know from basically. But they have a new IP. It looks like it takes place in space. Personally, I didn't have too much of a interest in that game. It didn't really grab me. But still, it's a new IP in AAA. I think they've in the past been kind of a smaller studio, but I think they've kind of expanded and become bigger now. Kenya, I thought looked interesting. I might be kind of confusing Kenya now in my head because, like I said, there was so much going on, and Project Anthem or whatever. But Kenya, it just looked interesting. It didn't show a lot, but it was one of those games where you see a little bit, and then you kind of want to see more going forward. Because when you see a little bit more, you might either actually fully be interested, or you might go from where you were kind of somewhat interested to, okay, I'm not at all anymore. So it's kind of one of those games where it sparked my interest. It was one of those where I saw it and I was like, oh, okay, I need to see more. So yeah, I thought that one was interesting. Ghostwire Tokyo, we saw more of. I thought we might see more of this. Personally, I'm disappointed in Ghostwire Tokyo. We got a release date of 2021 though, but personally, I'm disappointed in it because from the first trailer, kind of like I was mentioning, it sparked my interest where I was kind of like, I wonder what this is going to be like. The first trailer was more just kind of a cinematic-ish type trailer. It didn't really show any sort of gameplay, what you were going to do. The trailer we got now, the powers look kind of interesting, but the reason it personally disappoints me, and I know a lot of people won't agree, but the fact that it's a first person, I can't play first person games, no matter if it's shooter or fighting or whatever. First person just personally if I see anything in first person, I immediately lose interest. I just don't like first person cameras. First person cameras, personally, they just confuse the heck out of me. So that just it lost my interest, but which is too bad. But it happens. Sackboy, I was surprised to see something like Sackboy look like a Sackboy platformer. I just didn't know if he would come back or whatever, but he did. And then you had NBA 2K21. They didn't show a ton on NBA 2K21. It was basically Zion Williams in a gym shooting type of thing, but it'll be interesting to see more because I believe it was kind of built from the ground up type of thing. Because some sports games aren't necessarily built from the ground up. I believe MLB The Show wasn't necessarily built from the ground up when you went from PS3 to PS4. Madden obviously hasn't been, but NBA 2K did last gen when we went from PS3 to 4. Now they're doing it again, I believe, from 4 to 5. And it was one of the most. It was one of the first games last gen where I saw. I was like, man, the graphics type of thing. And personally, from all that was shown, nothing really stood out to me graphically. But at the same time, I kind of need to go back and watch maybe some of the trailers individually in 4K because I watched GameStop stream that said it was 4K, but it kind of looked like it wasn't. Like maybe it was, or maybe just too much compression or whatever from YouTube. I don't know, but I need to see if I can find the. I know I can find them, but see if the trailers, look a lot better in 4K. Better quality than perhaps what we got from the stream, even though, like I said, I didn't actually get a chance to watch the stream live. But even still, that's just kind of my thought with NBA 2K is that, like I said, it had a huge graphic upgrade last gen. So it'll be interesting to see more and see how, if it does have a big jump this gen again or not, unlike last gen, or like last gen. And then a couple other things here before I get into the last couple big things, which is there was a couple games I thought we might see that we didn't, which was interesting, which was Crash Bandicoot. There's been a lot of speculation about Crash Bandicoot. There was even some merchandise that leaked last night before today's PlayStation conference video, whatever you want to call it, that basically people thought that was like be a sign that they weren't announce it today, and it wasn't announced. So Crash Bandicoot is still not officially announced. I do think that we will get another Crash Bandicoot though, based off how well the remaster or remake trilogy did from a few years ago, how well that turned out, and just the fact that I feel like it kind of regained some fans for that franchise, and just all the rumors and everything. I think that will still happen, even though it wasn't shown today. I don't know if Activision is doing any sort of conference or whatever during the Summer Game Fest or not. So that'll be interesting to see. Do they does Activision hold something? If so, do they show it? I mean, that could happen with Batman too. I also, I don't know with the Game Fest, Summer Game Fest, and everything. There's talk that PlayStation's going to do something else like in August or something. Going forward, I don't know if Sony in August, if that's going to be more straight on, feature talk, basically. Like, if they're going to show more of the Create Button, because we've been told the Create Button's different than different than the Share Button was when it comes to like saving photos and videos and stuff, but we haven't really gone into detail exactly of how that is different than the Share Button. So it'll be interesting to get that kind of detail, as well as just more info about like backwards capabilities and stuff. Is something that I think we could see in August. And then, if that's the case, do we still in August get more gameplay reveals, or even if not reveals, do we get more info on the games we currently have? For example, it'll be interesting to see, like I said, Miles Morales Spider-Man is a launch game, but we didn't get like a ton of gameplay for it. It'll be interesting to see when do we get more like kind of hands-on gameplay of it, even if it's not like a state of play that's 20 minutes or anything like that, even if it's just a solid 5-minute video or whatever of the game being played rather than like a cinematic trailer. It'll be interesting to just kind of see when that kind of stuff happens. The other game was Silent Hill that didn't get shown, that I thought would be shown. again, that could still happen at some point because, like I said, I don't know if we're going to have more game reveals before the system comes out in like October or November or whatever. I don't remember back when Sony released PlayStation 4 news. I don't remember after February. Back then in February, they was when they did like the game reveal, kind of like they did today. Only it was February instead of June. But I don't remember back then if how they went about leading up to the release after February. I don't remember if it was just like pretty much all hardware, showing the hardware and talking about the features, or if we actually got more game reveals after that February, or we may have, and they may have not been first person. They may have just been third, or not first person, first party. They may have just been third party. I don't really remember. And the fact that Sony's been doing things differently here with PlayStation 5 announcements too makes me wonder just kind of how will they go about things. Like like I said, are they gonna do just straight up software hardware stuff, or are we gonna get more gameplay reveals? And if so, when? Because if we do, that could also be an opportunity to get such things as like a Crash Bandicoot showing or whatever. And then, but basically, the last two things I wanted to get into was we saw the console itself. Not sure how I feel about it, the way it looks, but that's not a big worry of mine because you get a console for the games. You don't really just stare at a console. So, I mean, it's not a big deal. It's kind of interesting that they went kind of with the two different colors, like the black and the white-ish type thing, kind of like the controller, rather than, and some blue or whatever, rather than, straight up all black, like most of the Sony consoles have been. So that's kind of interesting. Like I said, I don't really know how I feel about it. Maybe I just need to see some more pictures, look at it longer. I don't know. But I'm glad that we saw the console because there was a lot of speculation that we wouldn't see the console, and there was rumors too that because it was starting to officially be produced in the factories, that if we didn't see it, that it would be leaked. So it's just nice to officially see it and not have to kind of wonder about when we're going to see it. Even though, like I said, I don't feel like it's the biggest issue. Even the price is more important to me personally than just knowing what it looks like. But it's still nice to get that out of there and just get a little less info. Need to know. We did not get the price. But the interesting thing about being shown it too is that it looks like Sony is doing a discless, digital only version of the console as well as your typical physical version. I'm a physical video game player. I don't really buy games digitally. Like the only time I buy games digitally is if that's the only choice, if it's digital only type of thing. But yeah, I wasn't expecting that. It's just interesting because it's kind of like Xbox back when they did with Xbox One at one point. They did a digital only version, and there was rumors about maybe there being two different PlayStation 5s, but different in terms of the amount of memory or amount of storage they had. And so it looks like that's not the difference. It looks like the difference actually there is a difference, but it's not that. It looks like it's digital versus physical, and it'll be interesting to see in terms of price when we do get it, what the prices will be. Originally I was thinking PlayStation 4 would be $450, or PlayStation 5, excuse me, would be $450. A lot of people had it at $500. Now I'm kind of thinking, based off the fact that we saw two different versions, I'm kind of wondering if the digital version might be $400 and the physical might be $500. So just be kind of interesting to see what you guys think about that. And then finally, the biggest the game I was kind of the most excited to see was Horizon Zero Dawn, and we got mostly, I guess you could call, a cinematic trailer. You could say maybe there was a little bit of gameplay in there, but it wasn't like back when I believe the first Horizon was announced for the first time. You basically got to actually see gameplay of Aloy fighting a Thunderjaw. So it wasn't quite like that, but it was still interesting to see. And like I said, my disappointment with that is just the fact that it may not be till like 2022, but who knows? Maybe we'll get an update later in the year. And that's another thing with, when will we get more info on certain things too, is there's a possibility that come December that PlayStation could return to doing a PlayStation experience like they did for a few years before they stopped them, or even if not, they could do something similar like they did today, and maybe they could kind of give updates on games that are considered kind of early 2021 games, if you will. Maybe games that aren't at launch, but maybe are going to be early next year. Maybe they could give an update on those to kind of give you, release dates on those, or maybe games like Ratchet and Clank. Maybe by December, maybe we'll get more info on it, or official release date or something like that. So that could happen too. But yeah, going with Horizon Zero Dawn, I liked what I saw because the first game was amazing, and then the second trailer here we got to see new machines, which is all I really that was the big thing because the first game, that's really what's great about it, is finding the machines. I mean, it is fun to explore and stuff, but that's like the main hook of the first game, is finding the machines. So it was nice to see new machines, and it looked like we have woolly mammoths in the game, which I think is pretty cool. And then the fact that you can explore underwater, I think is pretty cool. It just adds like another dimension. So what looks kind of like perhaps like a rusted city or whatever, underneath the water, which is pretty cool. And the fact that you can explore under the water, it kind of makes me wonder if we'll get something which I have kind of thought about even before this, which is in the first game, you had a lot of different types of machines. You had some that were based off dinosaurs, some that were based off birds, some that were based off of like alligators and stuff. But the only one that was really based off of like a kind of a water-based creature was the alligator crocodile, if you will. And I'm wondering now, with the fact that there's being able to go underwater and like swim and stuff, if we're gonna see, if we're gonna see more like water-based machines. Like it'd be interesting to see like if there's maybe an octopus that you have to fight or something, or maybe there's sharks you have to fight or something like that. I think that'd be really cool. Fighting underwater or something. And then the other thing that's interesting is we've heard, but we didn't necessarily see it in the trailer, which is the first game. They wanted to have the ability to basically have flying machines that you can actually override and fly on, and we didn't actually see Aloy physically flying on a machine. But that's still something that could definitely be in the game. But just seeing the game and seeing, like I said, the underwater aspect to it adds a lot of new possibilities and just really exciting. But yeah, overall, I just love the PlayStation, what they showed today. Like I said, they showed a lot overall, and an hour and a half or whatever it was, hour 20, something like that. They were able to fit quite a bit in there in terms of just game announcements. Some expected, some definitely not expected, and they didn't. It wasn't like E3 type thing exactly, because you don't have a crowd there, but it had that kind of specialness to it because of what was shown. They didn't kind of slow it down by talking too much or anything like that. They didn't really talk much at all. There was only a few times, and I'm just really excited to get some concrete news, and just really excited, like I said, for personally for the Spider-Man spinoff, Ratchet and Clank. The fact that we most likely will get a actual second Spider-Man full-fledged sequel at some point, even though we don't know about that, and seeing Horizon, even though Horizon's further off than I was expecting. So just a lot of excitement going forward. Like I said, those three games personally are my, or four if you want to look at them, are my biggest. But even, like I said, games like Kenya and stuff looked kind of interesting. And so, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of games that it's going to be on PlayStation within the launch or within 2021, which is really exciting, that we won't necessarily have to wait till, say, early 2022 or something to actually get some good next-gen games. Because if you go by previous consoles and kind of the way releases went, that's kind of what you would a lot of times have, is the if you had a similar thing to that, would be waiting a year, maybe even a year and a half, which would in this case put you at like 2022 to really get some killer games. But like I think Ratchet and Clank is personally a system seller, and I also think that the Spider-Man game is, and I also think Horizon Zero Dawn is, even though that one is later out. But I have a feeling that Ratchet and Clank will be at some point next year, and maybe even early next year, which would be interesting. But yeah, just leave your comments down below. Overall, just let me know what games you thought stood out the most. What do you think about Insomniac and kind of release schedule with Ratchet and Clank and Spider-Man and stuff, and how that'll work out, and maybe which games you think that were shown will be a 2021 game that didn't get dates, and maybe which ones will be 2022. Do you think Horizon will be a 2022 game, or do you think it'll end up being a 2021 game? I personally would like to be able to get it in early 2021, because that's originally kind of where I thought Horizon would be, but I'm kind of thinking that's not going to happen now, but it'll be interesting. The last thing too, I wonder, going back with Insomniac a lot, which I know that a lot of this video has been about Insomniac, but that's because they're really the only first party studio that showed two things, and not just one. Like Guerrilla showed Horizon, but they didn't show the rumored first person shooter or whatever that people have been saying they made. And so I'm also wondering, because of that, with Horizon and Spider-Man, Ratchet and Clank and whatnot, Insomniac's a big studio, but of course they still do have some sort of limit in terms of the amount of people that work with them and how fast they can do things. And so I'm kind of curious too what your guys' thoughts are in terms of like I said, the release and just how that'll work, but also kind of will that kind of slow production for the Spider-Man 2 game, the fact that they are doing a spin-off game. And the reason I wonder about that, even though, like I said, I'm not too worried about that, because I still think you could get 3 straight years of Insomniac, which is amazing. But the reason I wonder about that is because if you look at Insomniac, they have, I believe, 2 teams. You could say even 3 if you count like a VR team. And I do believe that we'll see some VR games down the road from them, being that they're a first-party studio now, and that Sony's been trying to do the VR thing since I think 2016 or so. And we'll probably see some more VR kind of later down the road. But just kind of wondering, with the reason like I said, not trying to repeat myself too much here, but with the Insomniac thing, is that and how that could impact release dates, is that a lot of people, like I said, thought that Spider-Man would be a late 2021 game, that Ratchet and Clank would be would be a launch game. And my thought on that, and kind of the 2 teams and things, is that if you look back at PlayStation 4, Insomniac, I believe, started working, if I remember correctly, it was said on Spider-Man in late 2014. The game came out in later part of 2018, so it had about a 4-year development cycle. Ratchet and Clank came out in 2016, April of 2016. So the Spider-Man game was actually started on about a year and a half before Ratchet and Clank came out, which kind of shows what I mean about that they have multiple teams, working on multiple projects. But what I'm wondering with the Spider-Man Ratchet and Clank now, and potentially a second Ratchet and Clank, is just will that affect their production? And the reason I say that is because, say for example, you have one team that's working on Ratchet and Clank. You have the other team that's working on the Spider-Man Miles Morales game. The Miles Morales game looks like it's actually going to be done sooner than Ratchet and Clank, which is kind of a surprise. But let's say that's finished. Then does that team automatically go and start working on the Spider-Man sequel? Or do they join the team that's working on Ratchet and Clank? Or I would think Spider-Man 2 has already been started on. But the other, or are they having to kind of almost divide 2 teams now to work on the Spider-Man 2 as well as the Miles Morales game, which then means kind of a smaller team at first to work on the Spider-Man sequel, meaning that then they would kind of have to wait for Miles Morales game to be finished for them to be able to come back and join them full on the sequel. So yeah, I'm just kind of wondering how that'll work. And I hope that kind of made sense. I know I kind of went on a little bit on that, but just kind of hard to explain. Just kind of a hard time kind of explaining what I mean by that. But anyway, thank you for watching this video. Like and subscribe if you like, and just wondering what your thoughts are overall on everything. Thank you.